if they haven't been down for too long. There was an incident last week, Thursday in Ala Park, where we responded, and there was a gentleman there in cardiac arrest from a suspected narcotic overdose. So these are happening at homes, they're happening in businesses, they're happening at hotels. We've been going to the game rooms for these types of overdoses. So sadly, they're happening all over our island with increasing frequency, and it's concerning. The other thing that is also concerning is in some of the patients that I've talked to personally that have been revived and resuscitated, they didn't know they were doing fentanyl. They had thought they had bought, in some instances, cocaine, and they thought they were doing cocaine when in fact it was fentanyl, and rendered them unconscious. So they didn't even know to prepare with Narcan or have their friends have Narcan because they didn't know they were doing a narcotic. So with the increased
Once again, you're listening to Jim Ireland of Honolulu Emergency Medical Services. He is providing some details on the incident in Waikiki. Pausing there for some background noise. Let's go ahead and continue listening into this press conference.
Members who are addicted to narcotics can have that on hand because it is life-saving and it could be administered by lay people. It will be over the counter here very, very shortly. So I think with the widespread use of Narcan, there's a bill right now before the City Council. I think it's going to be heard for final reading tomorrow. Which will have bars and places where they sell liquor, cabarets, clubs, have Narcan on hand by ordinance. And so that potentially can help save lives. So, I think at this point we really want to educate people that no matter what drugs you're doing, and we are talking about illegal drugs, but you may be think you're getting something, and what you're actually getting is fentanyl. And it could drop you. These folks are being sometimes rendered unconscious literally minutes after doing the drug and don't even have time to summon help. And sometimes it's more than one person getting rendered unconscious almost instantaneously. So these are so powerful, and we really want to warn people that this is out there, and one time you use it, it could be your last.
And the scary thing in this kind of situation is you just need a little bit, right? I mean, people are unsuspectingly thinking they're taking Valium or taking other drugs, quote-unquote recreational drugs, and don't realize that it's laced, yeah?
Right, laced or completely replaced by fentanyl. And we've seen it in the powder form, in the pill form, so people have snorted it and died, people have taken the pills and died. The other thing, unfortunately, we have here in Honolulu is xylazine. Xylazine is a horse tranquilizer. Originally came out of Puerto Rico. The street name is Trank, but that's also getting mixed in with fentanyl, and people don't realizing they're getting that as well.
All right, you were just listening to City Emergency Services Director Jim Ireland, holding this news conference today following the incident in Waikiki where several people were found in a suspected overdose. HPD has launched an investigation. Now, this morning, Ireland wasn't so much addressing the specifics of that incident, more so discussing what, was very concerning what is happening around the city, a spike in fentanyl overdoses. Now, in regard to this specific investigation, here are the details we can share so far. A 44-year-old man was pronounced dead at the scene. This is Sunday morning at the Outrigger Reef Hotel in Waikiki, right off Kailua Road. 4 other people were taken to the hospital, and HPD says a 53-year-old man died at the hospital. 2 people are in serious condition, while another remains in critical. Police have also confirmed that fentanyl was detected at the scene. Hawaii News Now has learned through law enforcement sources that Narcan, a nasal spray, was used to reverse an opioid overdose and was administered to all of the victims. Now, EMS Director Jim Ireland was discussing the spike in overdoses around Honolulu. According to state health officials, fatal fentanyl overdoses have increased 400% in the last 5 years. Last year, fentanyl killed 60 people in Hawaii, the highest number ever recorded. And so many of those who are working to bring awareness to the problem hope that expanding access to Narcan, what Ireland was talking about, will help stop more people from dying. So we're following this story very closely, much more on air in our later newscasts and online at hawaiinewsnow.com.
Let's go ahead and give you now a look at some of your other top stories around Hawaii. Honolulu police are trying to track down a gunman and his accomplice. We're told they unsuccessfully tried to rob a couple early Sunday morning near the intersection of Kapi'olani Boulevard and Kaheka Street. That's just outside of Ala Moana Center. The victims told police they were walking home from a birthday party when they were suddenly approached by two men on bicycles who held them at gunpoint and demanded their gifts. But the suspects ended up riding away empty-handed. Anyone with information should contact police. New surveillance video shows a pair of alleged arsonists hand in hand minutes before a crime that caused $500,000 in damage. The videos from businesses in Iwilei show the pair on April 1st. They walked to a storage lot on Dillingham Boulevard where a boat was set on fire. Another vessel docked at the Alawai Harbor was also torched days later. Both boats are owned by a local electrician who turned the videos over to police. There's also footage of the car that picked up the pair after the fires. If you have any information on these alleged crimes, call Crime Stoppers at 955-8300.
Well, as always, so much happening in our nation's capital. For more, let's bring in Hawaii News Now Washington correspondent John Decker. John, thank you so much for joining us. Always enjoy talking with you. Let's start with this. Significant legislation passed over the weekend. Now, President Biden and Speaker McCarthy are each claiming victory for the bipartisan debt ceiling deal. Are they both winners for this deal?
Well, President Biden seems to think so. He's taking a victory lap, did that speech on Friday after the conclusion of the vote in the Senate, indicating that this would be successful legislation to make it to his desk. But Kevin McCarthy, the House Speaker, also taking credit for what he sees as a victory. After all, think about where we were 1 full month ago when President Biden and the White House, the individuals who speak on his behalf, saying there would be no negotiations at all concerning the debt ceiling. And that's exactly what happened. So, in fact, Republicans extracted a number of concessions by Democrats, by President Biden during the course of those negotiations. And now we won't have to talk about the debt ceiling issue for another 2 years. That's how long the debt ceiling extension lasts, until 2025.
Yeah, it's the perfect definition of a compromise, right? Each side, nobody gets really what they want. But, you know, deeping into this, what is contained in the legislation? And are there some Democratic and Republican lawmakers that are disappointed with the agreement?
Well, there are some budget cuts contained in this. In fact, that is something that very much disappoints progressives in the president's party. Also, in addition to that, there is approval for a new oil pipeline that runs through the states of both West Virginia and Virginia. That, too, is disappointing to a number of progressives. One of the reasons why Senator Bernie Sanders and Senator Elizabeth Warren both voted against this debt ceiling agreement. But there's also disappointment among Republicans as well, Mark. Those members of the House Freedom Caucus believe that there were not enough concessions extracted by House Speaker Kevin McCarthy during the course of his negotiations.
And always looking ahead to 2024 now. It's our expectation that this week we'll see two new Republicans enter the race for the GOP presidential nomination. Who's announcing this week and what are their chances?
Two names announcing their candidacy this week, two names to challenge Donald Trump for the Republican nomination. One is former Vice President Mike Pence, the other former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. Let me talk about both of them briefly. As it relates to Mike Pence, it's going to be an interesting dynamic. Never before has a former vice president challenged a former president, his former boss, for the GOP nomination. So we'll see a first there. It's going to be a narrow path that Mike Pence needs to weave in terms of becoming the Republican nominee, but he's counting for a strong showing in Iowa, the first state that votes in the process. And as it relates to Chris Christie, it will be his second run for the GOP nomination. He dropped out early in 2016, immediately threw his support behind Donald Trump. This time around, he's one of his strongest critics. And for Chris Christie, he believes that he can do well in New Hampshire, and that will provide momentum to his candidacy. But let's face it, the front runner for all Republicans right now is Donald Trump. That's who these challengers need to knock off, or at least make it a two-person race in order to challenge Mr. Trump for the Republican nomination.
Such a complex and fascinating dynamic. Hawaii News Now Washington correspondent John Decker. John, thank you very much for joining us.
We're learning more details about a close encounter between a Chinese warship and a U.S. destroyer in waters near Taiwan. We know now that the U.S. ship involved is the USS Chong-hoon, which is home ported at Pearl Harbor. We're told the two ships came within 150 feet of each other in the South China Sea. The ship is in the region to conduct military exercises with Canadian forces. Chinese officials blame the encounter on the U.S., calling the ship's presence there a provocation. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin says America doesn't seek conflict, but it will not back down in the face of bullying or coercion.
4 people are dead after their plane veered off course, triggering security concerns in our nation's capital. Natalie Brand has the details.
A Ring camera captured the sonic boom that rattled residents in Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia, and Southern Maryland Sunday. F-16 fighter jets scrambling to intercept a small plane caused the sound. The aircraft flew into restricted airspace over the nation's capital. The FAA says the Cessna left Elizabethton, Tennessee for Long Island, New York, when it suddenly turned around and headed for D.C., then later crashed more than 100 miles away in a remote part of Virginia.
The terrain out here, it's wilderness, is extremely rough, it's extremely steep.
Federal investigators say NORAD made repeated attempts to establish contact, but the pilot did not respond.
Part of this investigation of looking at when exactly did the pilot become unresponsive and why did the airplane fly the flight track that it did fly. We don't know that information yet.
Aviation experts say the plane could have lost pressurization, causing the pilot to lose consciousness. All 4 people on board were killed. The plane was registered to a Florida-based company owned by John and Barbara Rumpel. John Rumpel told the New York Times that his daughter, 2-year-old granddaughter, her nanny, and the pilot were on the flight. Natalie Brand, CBS News, Washington.
Gas prices may once again be on the rise. Saudi Arabia says it will cut 1 million barrels of oil a day for at least a month starting in July. That has U.S. gas futures ticking up. Experts predicting a small increase at the pump. OPEC Plus is also reportedly extending the oil reductions it announced in April through next year. And meanwhile, the Biden administration is stepping up hydrogen initiatives to reduce carbon emissions. The nation's energy secretary and climate advisor unveiled a plan on Monday to develop hydrogen as an alternative energy source. The goal is to produce 55 million metric tons of clean hydrogen fuel by 2050. The administration will reveal in September several hydrogen hubs around the country. The hubs will serve as pilot programs for hydrogen production.
Well, happening later today, the Department of Health is hosting an open house on the defueling of the Red Hill tanks. It takes place this afternoon inside the Honolulu High School cafeteria from 3 to 7 p.m. DOH officials say the event is intended to enhance and increase public engagement. We're told military officials will be there along with representatives from the EPA. And this comes after Friday's announcement that the EPA has finalized a consent order on the defueling and closure of the tanks. The EPA says its agreement with the Navy and Defense Logistics Agency will ensure more oversight and public engagement. The deal requires the Navy to maintain the drinking water system properly that was tainted in 2021, and the Navy must conduct numerous tests for contamination. Defueling is set to begin in October.
Russia claimed today that Ukraine has launched its highly anticipated counteroffensive to take back territory in the east that's been occupied by the Russian military since the start of the war. NBC's Molly Hunter reports from eastern Ukraine. Molly?
A pretty major statement by the Russian Ministry of Defense overnight claiming that they had repelled what they are calling a large-scale offensive in the southern part of that eastern Donetsk region. They said it was unsuccessful. They claimed that hundreds of Ukrainian troops died in this attempt to break through Russian defense lines. Now, NBC News has not verified this. Ukrainian officials are not specifically commenting on this. The Russian Ministry of Defense did release some drone videos that they say show Ukrainian tanks trying to break through those lines. But Ukrainian officials have long said that they're not going to announce or really confirm the start of this long kind of discussed spring counteroffensive. Well, yesterday, the Ukrainian military released a video. It was about 30 seconds showing Ukrainian soldiers literally going like this, shh, as if it was a campaign of silence. The defense minister tweeted that out, and he actually quoted the band Depeche Mode. He says, words are very unnecessary. They can only do harm. We've also got some new numbers on those Russian aerial bombardments that we have seen such an increase Jason. According to the UK Defense Ministry, 300 Russian drones have been fired at Ukraine just in the month of May. Interestingly, because the UK Defense Ministry says 90% of those have been shot down with older, cheaper air defenses and electronic jamming, not necessarily those U.S.-made Patriot air defense missiles. Molly Hunter, NBC News, Kharkiv.
New affordable housing income limits are now in effect for Honolulu. The city has updated the numbers for 2023. They help set guidelines for renters and buyers opting into various city housing programs. Income levels increased about 0.33% from last year, with the median income for a family of four now sitting at $131,000. Earners at 80% of that median are considered low. That annual income level is set at just over $104,000.
Take a look at this video into our newsroom. This is in Kailua on Aulike Street. That's where a huge geyser of water shot into the air. You can see the water also getting close to a nearby apartment building. Witnesses said the Pepsi truck hit the hydrant on a turn. HFD responded to the incident and shut off the water. Let's go ahead and give you a live look outside now. This is, of course, Mark, I know you recognize this place. Las Vegas.
In the daylight?
In the daylight. There it is, a sweltering 98 degrees. Oh, summer is upon us. Personally, I'm not a fan. I prefer the cold winter months.
So you stay inside.
Exactly, exactly. Let's go ahead and give you a look at your island weather with Guy Hoggy.
Our weather will remain fairly dry for the next several days. Not totally dry because there will likely be some overnight windward showers, but those aren't going to amount to very much. There's also a chance with the light winds for some spotty afternoon showers, but you can see at least through Monday of next week, there's nothing in the way of significant rainfall, and whatever rain comes in will be mostly of the light variety. So go out there, enjoy the best weather on the planet. It's going to be absolutely beautiful, right? Lots of sunshine expected, but again, with these light winds and the slightly higher humidity levels, we'll see some afternoon cloud buildups around the mountains, maybe some interior sections, and that cloud buildup might spawn a few showers, maybe even some spotty downpours late in the day into the early evening, all the way through Thursday. That's that weather pattern. It's not going to change through Thursday. Really nice stuff. And then nice, comfortable conditions will return. It's not going to be quite as humid when those breezy winds come in Friday and Saturday. And that means with those stronger trade winds, we might see a few more windward showers as well.
And we're now in the midst of hurricane season. Are you prepared? Be sure to catch our First Alert Hurricane Season 2023 special this Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. on KHNL and at 6:30 p.m. on KGMB and K5. Well, taking a look at stories from the feeds, a Delta flight was diverted last week. It was on its way to Detroit, and it's all because of an unruly passenger. And as Ivan Rodriguez explained, it is the latest in a string of incidents involving bad behavior.
A new report found unruly passenger incidents increased from 2021 to 2022. The most common types of incidents involve noncompliance, verbal abuse, and intoxication. Passengers behaving badly midair.
Sit! You see anyone else get down? Sit!
The disturbing trend of unruly passengers on flights is steadily on the rise, according to a new global analysis by the International Air Transport Association. The number of incidents up by more than a third in 2022 from 2021. Incidents of problematic passengers increasing by a whopping 37% year on year per IATA. Some of the biggest issues: intoxication, verbal abuse, and non-compliance with the rules. IATA cites vaping and smoking as the leading rule broken by rebellious flyers, followed by failure to fasten seatbelts when instructed, exceeding the carry-on baggage allowance or failing to store baggage when required, and consumption of own alcohol on board. While in-flight physical violence remains rare, there was a disturbing 61% rise from 2021 to 2022.
If somebody's belligerent, if somebody's abusive, there's no real immediate remedy. You can't just kick them off the plane.
In response, airlines along with the FAA are working towards zero-tolerance policies with the hope of curbing misconduct.
Don't do anything that would cause a threat or a disruption to your fellow passengers and your flight crews. The pilot always says that flight attendants are there primarily for your safety, and that's right.
In U.S. skies, 2021 was the worst year on record for bad air passenger behavior. 2022 saw a slight decline. This latest analysis that we're looking at is providing a global snapshot. In Atlanta, I'm Ivan Rodriguez.
Well, if you missed out on E.M. Tongi's homecoming spectacular last month, He's heading back to the North Shore very soon. Now, Hawaii's newest music star and the American Idol champion announced a concert July 2nd at Turtle Bay. It is a stacked lineup that also includes Kapena, Palafunga, and Natural Vibrations. Tickets are going on sale at tmrevents.net, starting at $29. Iam Tongi, the hottest ticket in town right now.
Yes, of course. We're also proud of him and his accomplishments, winning American Idol. So awesome to see
What a
that.
run.
Yep. We want to take you quickly to London now, where there's some news of another royal birth. Britain's Princess Eugenie has given birth to a baby boy, according to Buckingham Palace. Now, the child, unfortunately, has a long wait to the throne, if ever. The child is 13th in line to the throne. The 33-year-old Eugenie is the youngest daughter of Prince Andrew and Sarah, the Duchess of York. Now, the couple's eldest child, two-year-old August, is now a big brother. So the baby weighed 7 pounds 1 ounce, and it, of course, again, the couple's second child. How adorable!
What a
is that?
spectacular dress right there.
I know, right? But of course, because this branch of the family is a little bit further from the throne, the fanfare is not always as big, but it's still nice to see any royal news out there. So
the royal headlines
I love
always
it.
dominate.
Yeah. Hey, Mark, I want to say a big mahalo to you, Ashley, Emily Davis, Mary, all our behind-the-scenes team here for keeping This Is Now moving and flowing while I was gone. As you all noticed, I was out for a good week and a half. Reason being, I took a little trip. Speaking of airline travel, I went to Japan. That's my boyfriend Dustin there. We saw all the sights and sounds of both Tokyo, Kyoto, Osaka. That's our friend Mariko. She lives there. She's coming here soon, but she ended up becoming our impromptu tour guide and showing us around the city. This right here is Tsukiji Market. It was just so much fun to experience the culture of Japan. Asakusa here, a very popular and crowded place. And not only did we go to Japan, immediately after we came back, and we went to Seattle. Big mahalo to our friends over at Seattle Pride for inviting me over to perform. Pride in the Park. It was so great to see all the Hawaii people there. Also made some friends over there at Fox 13 News as they talked about Seattle Pride and all the coverage. So it was super great to meet everyone out there. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you so much, Mark. I appreciate all your work while I was away. Thanks, guys.